Exploring Healthier Masculinity within Business, a monthly call for executive and senior leaders within industry who too rarely have a space to stop, to breathe, to take off the weight of being a leader of teams and organizations. Taking place on the first Monday of every month. Email gary.turner@radicality.co.uk. Hi there, welcome to the next episode of In the Business of Healthy Masculinity. We are coming up to the end of this first series, which is going to be episode number 25, and it's going to be finishing in a really, really powerful way, which I'm really excited about. So let me introduce you to our guest today, which is Maciej Pawlik. I think I got the surname just about right, Maciej.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining me today. I know that you are a researcher, disaster scientist, and a whole lot more interesting things. So as we get going today, do you want to give a brief introduction to who you are and what you're working on right now before we go exploring?
So it's nice to meet you, Gary. Nice to see everyone. My name is Maciej. I'm a disaster scientist. So my area is focused on reducing risks to disasters around the world. I'm particularly focused on comparing the UK with the Japanese context and looking at how we can use nature and create a closer relationship with nature to reduce risks. And beyond that, I do lots of different things, trying to help schools and children learn about nature and bring resilience into the school system, which is currently lacking in the UK.
Oh, wow. I've got to ask, before we get going in more detail, Maciej, where does that come from? Has that always been a very intuitive sort of focus area for you? Was there a particular experience that made you really sort of step into the nature side of things?
I think the as we go forward in time, the world feels more isolating and more dangerous, and it's more difficult to find places of comfort. And for me, in particular, nature has always been a place of comfort. In particular, plants. I have a strong kind of connection to other species almost. It's kind of strange. We kind of always think about human beings as being potential sources of support, but for me personally, I found that actually along my journey, it might sound strange, but plants have been my source of support and sense of comfort. So I've deepened my relationship. Yeah.
That's really powerful, actually. On episode 20 of this platform, actually, we had Heather on, and she was and she does a lot of work around equine facilitation. So actually, how can we learn with and from horses? So yes, another sort of another non-human way that we can actually learn and even remember our capacity.
Yeah.
Really, really powerful. So I've got to. We had a chat beforehand. You gave me some ideas where you might want to explore. And you spoke about power. We're talking about the manosphere.
Yep.
How might they intersect? I just want to hand over to you and just go, what does power mean to Maciej in sort of March 2026? It's very topical, right? It's very topical.
Yeah. I feel that the ideas of power from history have been hijacked, and we have this kind of situation right now where the idea of power is led to mean subjugation. That power over someone, that world leaders or organizations have power because they can influence other people's lives and just the situations and circumstances that people live their life in. And I don't think it's right that power should be about subjugation. I think the true meaning of power should be about standing in the way of bullets when others are vulnerable, and lifting people out of vulnerability, and being able to empower others who are less fortunate than us. That is the true exercise of power, because in a way, the idea of power should be about empowering rather than taking power away from others. Whereas right now, it's just not the case, and we need to rewrite the narratives about that, because particularly about in relation to being a man, often in history and traditionally, as men, we've had these ideas about being powerful by owning things, having a house, having a car, and being able to share with others that, we've earned a lot of money, we are the breadwinners for a family. But actually, is that really it's quite a shallow way, I think, in terms of defining power in the 21st century. Everybody can kind of exercise power, and it shouldn't be something that is restricted to a select few that then present themselves as being better than others.
It's really interesting because what you've really sparked in me, and again, I'm old. I'm going to sound like a really old man now. I'm probably old enough to be your dad, Maciej, and I'm pretty sure I am. But that's also why I'm really glad you're here, though, because I think I don't have enough intergenerational conversations where I'm able to learn from you, and we're able to just go, okay, what do you see? How do we see it? What does power mean to one another? I think so. I still work within big corporations.
Of course,
there's definitely a power over sort of energy. That's very much a traditional approach. And I think what's really interesting, actually, and I'm someone myself I'd like to see as a bit of a disruptor, not just for the sake of it, but someone that wants power to be more equalized, more distributed. But it's amazing how the power structure actually is designed to suppress that, interestingly, within an organizational setting at least. And I'm wondering, through education, you've done your doctorate. How's your relationship been with power holders and power within the academia space within the UK?
Well, unfortunately, the big challenge, I think, is that, of course, I don't want to propagate any conspiracy theories or anything like that, but but I think that
Maciej, you have
yes, exactly. Exactly. I think that, unfortunately, because of capitalism, academia and education has been politicized in many ways, because capitalism encourages endless competition, right? That we have to compete for opportunities, we have to compete to secure jobs or whatever. If we have dreams or if we're creative, that creativity is secondary to the pursuit of a job, a role, etc. And of course, like from a financial sustainability perspective, you need a job, you need to sustain yourself, you need to support yourself. But in the context of education should be free at the point of access. And if you have ideas, you should be able to voice them. If you have questions, you should be able to ask them. I mean, the basic tenets of science and science research, but science in general, is that you ask questions and there's an openness to be able to ask those questions. And there are processes of validation and trying to confirm your views and everything like that. And if we close off education, and at the moment it is the case that unfortunately education system is constrained, so many questions are never answered, and children are never able to fully explore certain ideas. In the case of disaster research, for instance, there are these two competing arguments. On one side, people say that children are not old enough to understand disaster situations, or that disasters are too complex and too intense for children to grapple with. But on the other side, actually, in disaster situations, children are separated and they need to be able to find their families. They need to be able to cope on their own. And if we isolate them right now and don't include them in those conversations, then in the future, there might be excess deaths, there might be tragedies that we could prevent right now. So in the educational context, we need to be open to having these conversations with children, to be able to empower them to then go on and do more impactful things. If we restrict knowledge, if we restrict pathways of a personal and professional development, then we can never have more empowered, more impactful societies.
You know what's really hitting me, Maciej, as you share that perspective? Actually, I'm just thinking back to the horrific events in Gaza and what's unfolding now in Iran. In real time, right? You've got kids, babies, young toddlers that are going through a disaster scenario in real time, right? And I'm just, I couldn't imagine what it would be like, A, to have to do that, but B, not to be allowed to understand the world in their context, so they can respond in the most helpful way in that moment, right? So I'm just trying to bring it to life a little bit of what's going on right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's if we don't respect as well the information that is coming from experts, and we don't respect the evidence, and it's placed to one side, then it completely breaks down the structure of how we improve things, because there are experts who are human rights experts, people who know a lot about human rights violations, who are ringing the alarm bells, have been ringing the alarm bells for such a long time, and yet the proportionate action has not taken place from both the legal perspective, but also militarily and in terms of public safety. So it's really it's saying it's a sad situation is an understatement. It's an awful situation. And for young people in particular, if you're a young person right now and you're looking at the world and you're thinking to yourself, well, hang on a moment, if this can happen in this place, then what is the future going to look like? We can just exercise. Anyone who's powerful can exercise whatever action they want anywhere, and there are no moral standards that we actually stand by. And I think that's the really big tenant and message for anyone for the future, that we have to stand in the way of adversity, because nothing is going to get better, nothing is going to change if we don't challenge bad behavior and not only call it out, but actually do something about it. And that can be engaging in groups that are taking positive action, or that can be voicing more and more loudly and being open about your views that actually this is not acceptable.
It's really thank you, first of all, for sharing so passionately and your perspective, Maciej, because I'm curious, like, in your sort of network groups, your friendship groups, your family groups,
Yeah.
your social circles, is this a common conversation? Because from an older point of view, right, I can tell
Yeah.
you, from a sort of 40s, 50-year-old peer group
Yeah.
that I have, it's a lot more about, don't bring that up. It could disrupt the status quo. It could make things uncomfortable. People, say that too much. You could end up risking your job, right? So there's that level
Of
of
course. Yeah.
unhealthy masculine, that protectionism,
Yeah.
because it's almost like, I've got enough. Why would I risk losing that bit of enough that I've got? But it's their very children that are talking about what you're talking about, and
Yeah.
somehow they're not joining the dots between, we might be okay, but what are our kids inheriting? And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, I was just curious, to what extent in your peer groups is it a common conversation? Is it just you?
Yes, good question. I mean, to be honest with you, there are many. I mean, I interact with quite a large variety of people because my research is very immersive,
Mhm.
and I find that, as you say, the certain things are very controversial or considered controversial, which, to be honest, they shouldn't be, because these are questions of basic human morality and our humanity. And as you say, it can be compromising. People are worried to lose their jobs. The job market across the world is very constrained, and people are struggling to find work. And obviously, the system of governance that we have is capitalist. And if you don't have money, how do you sustain yourself? These questions are valid. And so people are worried, and people do say to me, what's the point of saying anything if it doesn't do anything, and especially if it risks potential job opportunities or career. But I just think to myself, life is short and nothing is guaranteed. I might not be here in 2 years. Who knows? We cannot live in this kind of complacency that we live in Britain and this is safe, and everything. There is the future exists essentially, whereas in the context of others, the future is not guaranteed because you're getting bombarded, bombed, etc. Some people say to me, they want to get involved, they do get involved, but it feels exhausting because they feel like they are the minority, and that's also a struggle. And a lot of people are talking about burnout from activism or whatever, and that's also valid, and it can be disconcerting and exhausting. But I just think to myself, you know what, like, I will stand by my principles. I'm alive right now in this moment, and what I stand by is based on evidence. I'm a scientist. I have a mind, of course, of my own. Every human being has a mind, but the evidence is astounding. The experts are there saying this of all sorts of bodies. It's not just one particular body. It's not a particular media organization. It is a range producing huge amounts of evidence. I come in contact with many people who have the most advanced data in terms of satellite imaging, of how GIS mapping of the areas that have been bombarded. You can see complete devastation. There is no legitimacy to the argument that there are, a particular country has the capacity to engage in precision strikes, when in reality you see photographic evidence or live satellite evidence that shows complete buildings destroyed, hospitals destroyed, schools destroyed. This is not. There is no morality in that. So I cannot kind of be silent and say nothing. And at the same time, I also have to leverage when I speak to different people, trying not to be too combative, because I've learned the lesson that, unfortunately, even though these things bring out a huge amount of anger, and I feel so, particularly when it's children, and but you have to be able to tell a story to bring people over. There has to be a conversion piece, a way to help people who are kind of not keen to engage, to engage a little bit, and to speak to them in a way that works for them, rather than having this imposition. Because how is that different from what other kind of people are doing, imposing their views on others? I shouldn't do that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's really powerful, because a couple of things that are coming up for me now, Maciej, which I like to explore. We mentioned about the manosphere piece.
Yeah.
And what I'm also holding is this sort of curiosity around, even with all the evidence, we've seen that change, systemic change, meaningful change, lots of good things are happening. We're not being overtly negative here, but the reality is, we know, and I'm a product of it, right? I work in the chemicals industry still. I'm challenging from inside of that sector in my own way. But it's incredibly intriguing how there's this sort of narrative of that we've got to keep growing, we've got to keep growing the business, we're going to acquire other companies, we'll be okay as long as we keep growing the business, even though their supply chain is intimately linked to harm, whether it be to West Papua and the indigenous people, where there's a new a new massive mine, or it might be something else going on some other part of the world. And I'm just wondering, how are you finding with your how do you manage that balance with your research, the reality of what's going on? How do we keep people engaged and move them beyond comfort into, how do you, I don't know what I would call it, maybe comfortable discomfort, like they're not so paralyzed that they won't do something, but they're not just sitting in comfort, that it's like, it's okay, it's not my problem. It's a real fine line, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think definitely, in terms of, I mean, the perception of nature and constantly drawing resources from nature. The problem is that nature is viewed as a resource generally by governments and uh, by large parts of society still, because that's what's propagated. But it's very clear that the human separation from nature, whether it's through urbanization or huge levels of digitization and spending lots of time online, it means that we're kind of lacking, and that manifests in society in various different ways. Conversations that I've had in my field work, many people have told me that they feel depressed, they feel unfulfilled, they feel, I mean, in some cases, unfortunately, people feel suicidal, because the life feels like a constant cycle of pushing, progress, but never enough, saturated. And that's not actually what it should be about. And particularly for men, that's been the case for a long time, being taught. I mean, I come from Poland, I'm Polish, and the lessons that I was told by many was constantly, more, don't show weakness, hard, no emotions. And I don't think that's right. I don't think there's, that is certainly a lesson I've learned in life, that if I cannot find, and many cases it was like this, that if I cannot see role models, male role models in my life ahead of me, older, wiser, to direct me, then in a way I shouldn't just manifest dissatisfaction or feel bad about it. I need to start to model something for younger generations, because who am I to complain if then I don't do that for others? So
Lovely.
Sort of I veered away from your question, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that we need to model better behavior, at least on a small scale. I mean, even what you say about working in the petrochemical industry, it's important to, even within that industry, try and find ways to advocate for positive changes, because it can be difficult for many individuals who cannot see, how can we completely shift towards green energy or alternatives. But if you show them kind of small bits to take them on a journey, on a pathway, then it's better, it's easier to kind of to bring that forward.
You did answer my question brilliantly.
Yeah.
Good. You've done a beautiful meander beyond it. No, but
Yes.
it's interesting. But it's interesting, isn't it? Like, I want to pick up on that
Mm.
point you made around that conditioning that we all have, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're a generation behind me, but you were
Hmm.
still brought up on the same. You know,
Yeah.
don't be
Yeah.
weak. You know, don't show
Yeah.
emotion. Yeah. So I feel like I'm definitely doing it now with my own
Mm.
family. You with
Yeah.
your generation, like there is a circuit break happening, which I
Mm.
think is really important. And I'm holding the curiosity, Maciej, that
Yes.
we're almost not the evidence that you and your colleagues, you know, past, present, and future are developing. It's
Yeah.
almost like unless you've got the consciousness
Hmm.
of those that actually do hold the power, if that
Yeah.
isn't meeting the level of data and
Hmm.
research,
Yeah.
like, do you know what I mean? Those things are they've got to be at the same level, or there's got to
Yeah.
be a level of consciousness that allows that amazing research
Hmm.
and evidence to be turned into action. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering,
Absolutely.
like, and when I look around the world at the moment with those that do have power, I'm like, do you know something? I'll be quite happy just for them all to bugger off and like
Yeah.
let's get Maciej into a position of power to use this brilliant
Oh God.
research. But you know what I mean? That like it's not
Yeah.
for me. It's not about age, right? You know, it's not.
Yeah.
You know, power shouldn't be held, in my opinion, based
Mm.
on your age or how old you are. It's really about
Yeah.
how responsible can you be
Mm.
if you are someone that has power.
Yeah. And I mean, in terms of the age thing, it's creating an intergenerational divide across the world because you have this, a lot of young people angry at older people, and then older people angry at young people, and through that, you're grouping people into a box, and there isn't. It's not a group. Young people are not a homogenous group. Neither are older people, and so it's kind of it's a false dichotomy actually. There's a huge variety of people with a huge variety of views. What I particularly don't like is the fact that um, through this kind of hijacking of what it means to be a man, and the idea of power, many young men, and especially white men, because that's who I've kind of come across in my work, and also in my circles, have been given this perception that being a man is also subjugating women, and that the women's rights movement, and it's really concerning. And I when I speak to people, many people are actually surprised, and I'm worried that people are surprised because this is growing and growing and growing. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
speaking to more and more young men who are telling me this, that being a man is subjugating women, and that women's rights movements and feminism is an infringement on men's rights, which is it's such a abhorrent thing to say. And it gets worse because through the work of Louis Theroux, but also others, there are many men who are exposed as genuinely believing that women are simply exist to please men, and are seen as a sex object, which is it's so much wrong with that, and yet it's being propagated as just a norm, and especially thinking about it as someone who's still in their 20s. Um, I am I am just horrified that people my age are taking this on as a mindset,
Mm-hmm.
and because it means that actually it's being passed through generations, and especially through my research. I mean, this is not my area of expertise, but I come across, and I have an interest in this, in terms of human trafficking. United States, Europe, UK, we are the promoters, unfortunately, of the sex trafficking industries in Asia, and we initially fueled it. And so it's something that is also growing because there is a demand, because there is this propagation of these views about women, which is, you know, we need to do things about this to recreate and show a new vision of what it should be, what it should mean to be a man, and what it should mean to exercise power. As I said, to help people, to empower others, to stand, to shield, to protect, rather than kind of these awful alternatives, and get away from this idea that kind of there's such a great degree of separation between how we identify as men, and women's identity and women's suffrage. We should be allies. We should be supporters. We should be doing everything we can to create a more equitable world. Unfortunately, some militant activists perhaps push certain groups down. Certain men feel that they are being blamed for everything, and so this is fueling kind of an anger, and then but we need to find ways of connecting rather than creating this disconnect and fueling more anger and more subjugation.
It's so, thank you for sharing that. Uh, it's really actually beautiful timing. It almost makes me a bit emotional, I've got to be honest, Maciej, because from the point of view that you're going to be, let's say, episode 25 out of 25 conversations that I've had so far on this healthier masculinity topic.
Yeah.
And after watching Louis through, as I did the previous weekend as we're recording, I'm astounded. I'm astounded that there are these young men that are like, what got me the most, I'll be honest, was charging some kid or some man $35 to be able to ring in and hurl abuse at a woman. I'm like, where are we? Like, how's that?
Yeah.
How have we monetized abuse?
Yeah.
On and it's really, I'm really glad you brought this into the space today, because this is something I think really needs to be front and center of a business discussion as well, to say, look, we might be part of, everything's connected, right? Everything's interconnected.
Yeah.
But why wouldn't we be leading sessions on, hey, we've all got kids. Are we able to talk to each other as parents here around what our kids are going through at the moment?
Yeah.
Because what I see in workspaces, it's very much that you operate like a body with your you've got a head on top of a body that walks around, that doesn't challenge anything or think about anything. And I think it's so bloody important now, like with particularly with the tech bros, and how do we, open question for you, Maciej, like how, what are some of the ideas you've had, or maybe with your friend, like, how do we actually reach people to help them understand that it's not women, it's inequality, it's billionaire wealth being extracted out of the system, it's oligarchy. Do you know what I mean? They're the root causes, not women, right? Or what would you build, add, or challenge around my analysis?
Yes. No, I agree. I think that I mean, I'm a staunch anti-capitalist, so I don't so I'm biased in that sense, but I genuinely believe that there is no one narrative. I know a lot of people now, particularly, I mean, Zach Polanski is wonderful as he is. Obviously, he's brought up this idea that we need to tell a better story, right? And even Caroline Lucas about talking about England in a different way, better England. Creating a better story. But I actually think my perception is that actually it's a collection of stories. It's not one story, because one story gives the impression that perhaps there's one narrative. Like, for instance, talking about wealth inequality, or talking about what Britishness is, or whatever. Actually, I think we need to understand the different situations of different people and be able to tailor stories to their individual circumstances to then bring them along on the journey. That's really difficult, because there are lots of different people with lots of wonderful and interesting and also difficult and powerful stories. But we need to start doing that, and we need to start finding mechanisms of doing that. I'm trying to understand and learn about this more, but it's a time-consuming process, and I don't have the answers right now. I think that's a very scientific a kind of comment, because that's what often people say. We don't know enough yet, and we don't have the answers. But at least we know what the problems are, and we know the tactics of kind of vested interests and people who have kind of these quite perverse interests of manipulating people. We know about this, so at least we can challenge it. But we need to be able to tailor stories and actually tell people and help them absorb information. I'm very interested in kind of these ideas of applicable knowledge, because often in the schooling system you have knowledge, full stop, where you're supposed to learn things. Yes, so learning things is about kind of being able to draw on information that you can regurgitate. But actually, applied knowledge, especially in disaster contexts, is about being able to grab something from within and apply it in that context to make the change, so that you are empowered. Yes, so you can actually make something out of what you know. And I think that's great, and I think that's what we need to be able to do. A big challenge to the system is if you can create more networks of knowledge sharing, mutual aid, and break down barriers to to resources, to provisions, because the way that the system works is that if you are disempowered, if you lack resources, if you don't know about pathways towards sources of information, then you'll continue to be disempowered and you'll be stuck, and so you'll be vulnerable and open to vested interests coming in and influencing you without you even knowing, because it's such powerful mechanisms. So yeah, it's a series of stories. We just need to find them.
I love that. Do you know something? You're wrapping up our beautiful conversation today, Maciej, honestly. Oh my goodness. I'm glad you brought that up though as well, because like supremacy culture, right, is all based on one. There's only one way to do something, right? Or binary thinking, like it's either this way or that way, or there's only one story. So I just love how you brought that into our conversation today. I want to give you the last word. So you've got every big hairy CEO, right, watching this. They're not, but you never know. They might be one day. What would your message be to them? If you're able literally to be in a room with 100 senior execs, you actually have the power to change things. What would you say to them?
Okay. What would I say to them? I would say to them that I think it's time to develop a new currency. Yes, we are so used to dealing in money and thinking about things in financial terms. And absolutely, financial terms are still relevant in terms of the way we pay for things and exchange and whatever. But we need to start seeing positive impact and societal change, societal progress, societal development, equitable development as a currency. That if I get given £10,000, we have excess profit or something, and we invested in or even more money, and we invested in a housing development, and we rent the housing at a hugely discounted rate to people. That is societal progress. We reduce homelessness. We reduce the burden of students. We reduce the burden of single moms. We reduce child poverty. That is something to feel good about, not having billions of dollars or pounds in bank accounts. And this is not a front or an attack on people who are trying to grow their wealth, their portfolio, etc. But it's trying to create that story that actually the real rush of life, the real kind of amazing thing about being alive and being in this moment is being able to use the power that we have, the financial power or whatever other power, to impact positive social change, to take someone out of poverty, to help someone who is hungry to eat, or to help a single mom who is struggling to pay her bills. That is what life is about. That is what empowerment is about. And I think as a CEO, there's a pride and there's a kind of a greatness, and especially in a British context, that is what being British is about: helping others and standing in the face of adversity.
Ooh, I'm so glad you're one of our future leaders, Maciej, may I say. Thank God for that.
You're very kind.
No, I'm serious. Honestly, thank you for bringing all of you to this conversation. I've really enjoyed it. You've shared some really powerful insights. And everybody, if you please give your feedback, do follow Maciej on LinkedIn. That'll also be in the show notes. And good luck with the rest of your research. And let's keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.